Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Arnold. I'm on the business development team, and today we're going to talk about a platform called Social API, and I'd like to give you a little bit of a sense of why we built it, how it's going to change the web, and also open up to questions in case you haven't used it before or you're curious about all the companies that are currently leveraging it. So what you're looking at right now is a current version of Firefox. And as you can see, I have all of my email coming in through a Zimbra server on my Firefox sidebar. So this is essentially a web service that is provided by Zimbra, and I am able to fetch from their server without any add-on in my browser. So Firefox has had a famous reputation of being the most customizable browser for many years until some wonderful competitors have come in and shaken up that space. But it's still a big part of our legacy. And so we're trying to figure out how can we push this forward and make this a tool that can lead into the future. So let's say that I want to tell everybody that this event is starting. And let's say I want to tweet this. And I'm currently on the Air Mozilla page, so I can click on the share button in Twitter. I can tell my friends, hey, the presentation is starting, and I can tweet it. It goes into my network, and all my followers now know that they can join the event and watch. So that also was not an add-on. This was a web service provided by Twitter directly to my Firefox browser, recognizing my authenticated state. So I have Shane Caraveo here, who's our lead engineer on the Social API, and we'd like to walk you through the philosophy of the platform, and then we can come back and go into a little bit of the detail of each of the companies that are implementing. But first, I want to show you what we have currently unveiled. This is an example of our activations page. The URL is activations.mozilla.org, and you'll get to see all of these and play around with them in real time. And by the way, you're seeing a URL routing through for the English language in the Mozilla CDN. We now have the platform available in 10 languages, and so no matter what region you are in the world, you'll get a different version of the page with different providers that are local to that region. Also, I wanted to point out that we have a IRC chat room. If you have any questions during this meeting, go ahead and talk to Shane. The room is #social_dev. Okay, and I look forward to taking your questions. All right, so now I'm going to toggle out of this and into the presentation. Okay. So as you're aware, we over 10 years ago launched a browser that it was based on open source and allowed anyone to be able to contribute code into our central code base. We enabled an API called the Add-ons API that allows any site to customize the browser for their users, allows anyone to introduce a theme. Let's say I want to have a FIFA World Cup flag, so I can adopt themes for my browser Chrome and that kind of thing. So we actually have had over 3 billion downloads of Zool add-ons since we introduced this, and it is one of the things that has made Firefox one of the most popular browsers in the world. We now want to do a few new things to allow developers and publishers to customize Firefox on demand. So, and also, just to illustrate, 85% of Firefox users use one add-on or more, with an average being 5 add-ons per user. And also, a lot of formerly unestablished websites have used the Firefox platform to catapult their own awareness using us as a marketing platform. So we're a great tool to allow publishers to reach an audience from a cold start. And that is one of our principles, to allow anyone to have the ability to shape the internet. Now, there's another interesting thing that happened over the last decade. And the funny thing is, we presaged this a long time ago. One of the Mozilla principles is that everyone should be able to control and shape the internet to their own preferences. And along came this thing that O'Reilly Media called Web 2.0, where instead of having the internet being a broadcast medium, where you would always go to Yahoo or AOL and they would tell you what is the news of the day, the users can curate their own experience, and they can publish their own experiences as well. So social media sites began to proliferate over the past 5 years. And you're probably familiar with a phenomenon that we call NASCAR, where every website that you visited had 10 or so buttons that are like huge colorful ads at the top of the page that the publisher is trying to encourage you to publish their articles forward. These are achieved with JavaScript, and every page that loads them has to load all those 10 sources as part of the loading of the page. This can become heavy, and in some cases, like the recent discussion about Add This on whitehouse.gov, can allow the potential fingerprinting using HTML5 Canvas to a third party that the White House did not anticipate was following everyone who's going to the site. So, in addition to the burden to the load of the page that is caused by this NASCAR effect of these icons, there's also the potential leakage of private data that you did not intend to share on the web. But fundamentally, what is the purpose of these buttons? The buttons are essentially helping users to do a core plumbing feature of the internet, to share, to take an action that typically is done at the browser Chrome. And so we wanted to find a way that we can facilitate this need of users to curate or share or collect the web without having to have a third party involved. 1 second. William? William? Sorry, is it possible? Thanks. So, and the other thing is every add-on requires a download of software. Every add-on requires a download of software, which is a marketing hurdle to publishers who are trying to create engagement using the Firefox platform. And so the idea of sending users off to a marketplace and forcing them to download software so that they can go back and experience the web interrupts the flow of the user, and also is giving the wrong signal, which is suggesting that you need to download software to visit any new site. And that can also open up to a sort of lackadaisical openness of users to download software from untrusted sources. And so this is also essentially creating a vulnerability. So we're hoping that this new platform allows people to do the things that they want to do, and publishers to create the engagement that they want without pushing software down to the user. Finally, there is an issue that sometimes an add-on will make a request for an API of the device, like the camera or the microphone, that conflicts with another add-on. And this can cause conflicts that sometimes can cause crashes. Of course, we try to minimize the crash potential for Firefox. We watch these kinds of conflicts between add-ons all the time. But the good news about this new API, because there's no software to conflict, it cannot crash Firefox. So, we looked at the use cases that we wanted to address with this new tool, and we wanted to take the core functionality of what these widgets were trying to achieve, these embedded widgets on the pages. One of the key ones is notifications. When a user is not on your website, you want to be able to know that something has happened in your network without having to go back to the site. So notifications is a core feature we wanted to have in the platform. The ability to have activity tickers, headlines, dashboards, in order to have a content stream that you can take with you on the go without always having to have a tab open, pushing notifications in that open tab. And consider that if you have 100 or so tabs open, you have significant memory drain on your device. And so if you are able to have some sites closed and have the notifications come only when needed, it also improves the memory performance of your device. Finally, there's a lot of interesting services that are coming up around bookmarking, saving to cloud, flagging, upvoting, liking, or to copy desktop files into your cloud account. These are essentially plumbing functions. They don't need to be accomplished by a web page. And so if these are things that browsers like Chrome, Internet Explorer, Opera, Safari, and Firefox can address, we can allow publishers to focus on delivering the value prop to the user without dealing with these plumbing issues. So these are the different types of implementation that we've put into Firefox, and you can see the logos on the side are the different brands that are using these in order to create engagement with users. So the predominant one, of course it was called Social API initially, is the ability to share content into a social network that is currently out of the user's view. So we have 2 Russian social networks, 1 Japanese, 1 Chinese, and 3 US social networks that are currently using this tool. We also have the ability to send and receive email without ever leaving the web page that you're on. We currently have Zimbra and Google providing support for this. We also have two news tickers that are built into the sidebar, so you can get headlines that are personalized to your interests in the sidebar. Currently we have a German publisher called Berta, which has a Clicks newsreader, and we also have the Sphere news ticker, which is an interest-based news ticker. We have two sports events that have used the platform, the Vans Triple Crown surfing event and the goal.com website that powered the FIFA score ticker for Firefox during the last World Cup. And we also have a Indian site called Savin, which provides a music ticker on the side that you can add songs to your playlist that other users are listening to. And interestingly, we had two non-social services implement a cloud save feature. Delicious and Pocket allow a bookmarking tool that functions across browsers and across devices. And so we found that even though this is not inherently social, we're seeing that developers are taking this in a completely new direction. And we'll give a demonstration of those later on. And we're also looking into the ability to do enhanced shopping capability in the browser. This is something we plan to release soon. So I'd like to take you through a few screenshots in case you don't have any accounts on these and you'd like to see what they look like. This is an example of our Japanese partner Mixi. Mixi is a local social network in Japan. They have the ability to favorite, to send quick notes to friends, to get notifications in the sidebar. And you can see what a notification looks like in the browser Chrome. It's a small number of the messages that you have waiting for you on site when you go back. So this is an example of the share button. You currently have to have a provider active in order to see the paper airplane icon in your browser Chrome. And I can take any current URL and quickly share it into any social network I prefer by selecting which of the providers I wish to post to. This is an example of the Pocket integration. Pocket uses a slightly different version of the API. It's not intended to share into social network. It's intended to share into the user's or to save into the user's logged Pocket account. These are a couple of 4 examples of content streams. In the upper left, you see Sphere. This is the personalized newsreader. To the right, you see Goal.com, the FIFA sports score ticker. In the lower left, you see the Berta newsreader with the share capability built into the sidebar. In the right, you see Savin music player. And these are screenshots of the 2 mail implementations, Google and Zimbra. So we have the documentation on MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network. We also have the Activation Directory live, so you can go and play with these right now. It's localized to 10 languages around the world. The URL is activation.mozilla.org. Oh, I'm sorry, please don't use this URL. This is a dev server URL. And I'd be interested to take any questions you have. Otherwise, I'm going to toggle out of this and show you a few live examples. Okay, and also Shane, I don't know if you'd like to make some comments about what it was like to work with partners on this or some of your thinking as you went through the process?
Well, I hadn't really thought about answering that kind of a question. Working with partners was quite interesting. So I think the one of the main kind of tenets on social API stuff is that we're not asking them to do any deep integrations with Firefox. They don't need to understand anything about the internals as you would with add-ons. They're able to just do this on the web from their own web servers, and it's basically a manifest that gets installed into Firefox to load these web pages. This lowers their overhead pretty significantly in being able to do things, and we've actually got a couple of the providers who are going to be migrating users off of their add-ons because we are providing enough functionality to give them primarily what they want out of this mechanism. So they're really interested in that type of an aspect. And yeah, so I think that's kind of the top level for me as far as those interactions. It's all been very interesting.
I don't know if we have any questions coming in IRC. Oh, 1 second, Shane. Yes.
Have you considered changing the name? Because I think it's a confusing name that suggests it's more limited than it actually is.
That's a really good point. So the question was, are we planning to change the name? A lot of these services, like Gmail, are not inherently social. It's something I use for my own personal use, Pocket as well, Savin as well. So there has been some thought that it needs to have a new name, or some of the features need to have a new name inside of it. I can't say what it could be in the future, but the important thing is this isn't really something that we're going to be doing a big brand dance around, because essentially add-ons are things that are the publisher's tool, not ours. And so these are ports into Firefox, so the name that we call it is not so important as what the publishers themselves call it. And so we haven't thought that we want to impose any brand restrictions about what somebody calls, let's say, Savin for Firefox or something like this. But the marketing team is planning to revisit this, especially for these ones that are inherently non-social.
This reminds me a bit of the smartphone app model in various ways, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you think about the smartphone app model as compared to what you're doing here.
That's a really good point. So we had a observation here that this resembles what Mozilla is doing with their smartphone application model as well. And just to talk a little bit about that, Firefox OS is a web phone. The idea is that we don't want users to be locked into a regime where they're confined in their walled garden, where a publisher has to go through some kind of fancy Cocoa or Objective-C development in order to get users to be able to see their website on a mobile phone. Nor do we want a developer to have to code in Java in order to get into an Android phone. We think that the web already works on Android phones, the web already works on iPhones. So why not code an app once for the web and allow it to be accessible everywhere? So the Firefox OS device is inherently non-wrapper based. So if you have a web that is tailored for mobile across all devices, iPhone, Android, Windows, Tizen, then you are able to publish to all of them without doing any special code jumps in order to get into them. The only thing you have to do is essentially drive users to the URL. So we think that the web has a very large base of developers who should be able to tackle the issue of delivering a really great mobile experience. And so we're working with developers to take the URL that they already have and allow it to work uniformly across iPhone, Android, Firefox, and Windows. So how is this similar? Essentially, all of these are web services. And as we said before, there is no download. So similar to not needing to go to a marketplace to download software that would be a phone app, you don't need to go to a marketplace to activate a web service. So there is no software that we're pushing here. And so it differs slightly from our add-ons marketplace, which typically we do allow developers to provide software directly to the user. So these models are analogous, and they foster the same goal of allowing the publishers to be in control of how they deliver web services to users without introducing extra hurdles that can disrupt the marketing flow of onboarding. Shane?
I can add a little bit to that as well. Historically, and this predates Firefox OS, when the Labs group was initially working on the idea of web apps for Firefox, the mechanism that Social API was based on was a part of that design and that work. When the potential for the deal with Facebook came along, which is when Social API got its very first start, those ideas were separated out specifically to work within the desktop environment the way that you see it now. So it has a very kind of common shared root with the web apps. There's a lot of concepts that are the same, but it's basically designed into vertical use cases to be more specific and to provide that UI just for desktop. There are ways that we could eventually cross over and make these things work across platforms. And there are probably a few things that we would take out of Firefox OS and or Android in order to provide that similar functionality on desktop.
And another addition to that, this is something that we hope that all other browsers adopt as well. If you are of a technical nature and you'd like to go in and see what a manifest looks like, you can activate any one of these and see how the manifest operates. All of the content of it are just URLs. Where to get the logos, where to get the content stream, everything that is necessary for us to do the display of all of the content panels. So it would be very easy for another browser to work with any of these publishers to open an infrastructure like this as well. I think one thing that is probably in the back of a lot of people's minds are, if this thing is inherently social, is there a risk of some kind of data leakage or unintentional sharing? And so I'd like to bring that up and talk a little bit about that. One way conceptually to think of this for someone, a layperson like me, is that these are very similar to having two windows open in isolation. There is no communication across the different windows unless the user initiates it. So there's no information that any of my active social providers see here unless I deliberately pick which of the providers I'm going to share into. So, for instance, let's say that I want to tell my Japanese friends about the availability of these services in Japan. I can pick the provider I'm going to share into, and I can say, and then click share, and it goes into my network and closes. So the fact that I just did that, Google has no awareness, even though Google is also an active service right now. Each of these is an isolated window that is essentially sandboxed from each other. This prevents the conflict that could lead to browser crashes. And we hope that this will lead to greater engagement in the Web 2.0 world that we want to see flourish without the need to have everybody savvy on exactly what this thing is. So hopefully it is the services themselves that will speak for themselves, and we will not have to do much marketing around this in order to allow the publishers and the developers to take over this engagement strategy. And with that, I'd like to see if there's any other questions, Shane?
We've only gotten one question on IRC, which goes back to very early in your slides when you mentioned the number of add-ons that people have installed. And so I have one question. You mentioned that there was a 5 add-on average per user out of users that have add-ons installed. And the question was, does that mean or median? Do you have any, I guess, for me, do you have any more detail on where those numbers come from, what they represent?
Yes, that is a great question. I think Amy Tsay, who typically presents in the Monday meetings, could have more detail about the average engagement. This was just a report from that team that I'd seen quite a while ago.
Cool.
All right. If there are any other questions or implementations you'd like me to demo, I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, we can wrap up. All right. Thank you very much. And please go to activations.mozilla.org. Try these implementations out. And if you have any questions or comments, please write to Christopher Arnold, C. Arnold, @mozilla.com. Thanks for all your support.